Okay. Okay. So look, this is one. This is a sociology class you're taking, and so one of the guys that invented sociology is this French guy named Emile Durkheim. There's a picture of him, sort of right there, and he said that marriage, getting married, having a family, and being part of society, he said. He says it involves. I really like this idea here. It involves a mental, which is kind of how you think, and a moral, what do you believe, fusion of individuals. And so when you get married, when you have a family, what it's doing to you is it's kind of connecting you and how you think and what you believe. It's kind of you're no longer a lone ranger anymore when you're in a family. You're somebody who now has to start thinking about other people. And you're somebody who has to start believing for somebody else now. Your spouse, your lover, your kids that you're starting to raise. You're having to believe for them, and you're having to believe what's wrong and what's right now. And you're having to teach, your children not just how to think, but how to believe what's wrong and what's right. You're not you anymore. You're not a selfish college kid anymore. You're having to think about other people now, and it's an incredible. I just love this idea. He comes up with this fusion. You're now fused and you're connected to other people. The second thing, look at the second thing. It's kind of a practical idea. Practically, when you're part of a family, and you've been part of a family yourself, you know that this is true. Everybody has something to do. Everybody has a job to do. Everybody, it's a division of labor, right? Everybody's not a generalist. Everybody's a specialist. And so everybody has a job to do. Somebody unloads the dishwasher. Somebody does the laundry. Somebody's mowing the yard. Somebody's doing this. Somebody's doing that. And so we learn to be efficient in our family. And it teaches us these really important skills when we go out and we're a roommate in college, or we go out and we work in a job somewhere, and we learn, well, I'm good at this and I'm good at that, and I can do this and I can do that. And we just kind of learn about ourselves, and we learn how to do something. And we learn what we're good at. And we learn how to apply ourselves, and we learn how to work kind of efficiently, because we've learned some basic kinds of skills about ourselves when we're in a family. And families kind of teach us how to do that, how to teach us to get ready for the big world outside. So look at the bottom. Family inserts itself. So you've got your family inside of you. You're all the weird, strange, wonderful values and ideas of your family. You've got that inside of you. Sometimes you open your mouth and your mom's words come out, right? But it also inserts America into you. It inserts Texas into you. It inserts Houston into you. So think about, and this is another thing to write down in your notes when you're sitting here. Think about your beliefs and think about your attitudes. Think about some of your hopes and dreams. You didn't invent those. They aren't in your DNA. They were inserted into you from your family. Jot some of those down in your notes so that you can think about them more concretely. That's what a family does. It does it to you. So think about, on the reverse, think about people who don't have a family. Think about people whose families are dysfunctional. Or you'll take a criminology course in your major here, and there are some people who are raised in criminal families, in deviant families, and they learn all kinds of awful values, and they learn all kinds of terrible skills from their wicked and terrible families. Well, not you. You've learned all kinds of wonderful things from your family. Well, write some of those down in your notes. Who are you? And you're going to pass those on to the families that you create. Think about what those are. They're almost automatic because they're so ingrained into you. But think about that. Think about what those are. Think about what's so important to you. and why they're important, why you're going to remember what those are. What got fused into you, Durkheim would say. What was fused into you as you were growing up, repeated over and over and over again. Okay, I like this. This is another sociologist. This is a guy from America. His name is Talcott Parsons. This is a little old-fashioned because when Parsons was writing his theories, we kind of had old-fashioned families. We had mom staying home and dad going to work. And he's talking about this nuclear family where mom would be raising the little children and then she'd send them off to school. This is what we still call it today, primary socialization, where mom would be teaching just the basic lessons of life to her children. And then she would, to obey the teacher and to tie your shoes and to potty training them and then send them off to school. That's really what families are responsible to do. And that's what we call primary socialization, the basics. And then send them off to school. And school is responsible for what we call secondary socialization. They teach us how to multiply and divide fractions and how to get in line. And they teach us how to make friends with all kinds of different people. Now, the second part here is the part that I think is really interesting. This really doesn't happen so much anymore because we don't have families like this anymore. But what Parsons said is that families back here in the 1950s, let's say, when dad would come home from work and mom would be there waiting for him, his wife would be there waiting for him, he'd be at work and he'd be all stressed out at work, and he'd come home. In the family was a stabilizing experience for him. And he'd come home and she would listen to what he had to say and she would support him, and his children would be there and they would love him and they would tell him everything was going to be okay. And because, it was so stressful at work. Not because he was having to go away and fight off the invading army or have to go to work and have to chop down a bunch of trees, but it was emotionally and psychologically stressful. That was the new kind of industrial work that he had to do after World War II. And so I put this in here because I like his theory is called the warm bath theory. Isn't that funny? It's like he would come home and he'd take his shoes off and she'd greet him at the door and she'd give him a beer and he'd sit down in his chair and he'd watch TV and she would have his dinner ready for him. And it was just a wonderful experience to come home, and it would be a safe refuge away from work. Well, we have laptops now and we come home and we keep working, and so it's not a warm bath anymore. We have a cell phone stuck in our ear, and nobody escapes from work anymore. This theory doesn't work anymore. But I look at it and I introduce it to you because I want you to see this is maybe what your grandparents experienced a long time ago, where the home was an escape. I don't think it's like this anymore. What was home like when you were growing up? It may not have been a warm bath. Jot down in your notes what metaphor would you use to describe what your home life was like when your parents came home from work. Maybe they didn't come home from work. Maybe your parents had to do a lot of work at home. If you had to create a metaphor for your home when you come home from work, what would you like it to be? Maybe you should write something down, or maybe you could imagine or dream what your home is. Do you want it to be a refuge when you come home for your kids? What's it going to be like? And back then in the 50s, they didn't have loads and loads of homework like you probably had when you came home from work. We do way too much homework on our kids nowadays anyway. Maybe jot some ideas down in your notes here. Okay, now I'm giving you here in this first slideshow lots of information that's not in your textbook because I'm trying to just introduce you the basics about families. Structural functionalism, and that's in your textbook. Here are that theory's 4 basic functions of what families do, what families are responsible to do. Remember at the very beginning of the slideshow we talked about what is it families are supposed to do. if they're functioning. Well, if they're functioning, families are supposed to do this. They're responsible for what we call sexual regulation. In other words, your dad, right? He's going to make sure who's going out on it, what time, when can you go out, how old are you when you can go on a date, and when are you supposed to come back home again, and who are you going out with? So he's regulating sexual behavior in the family. They're the ones our society holds responsible for doing that. I said earlier, primary socialization, so your family's raising you and teaching you the basics that you need to know before you go off to school. How to go to the bathroom on your own, potty training. I always use that as an example. How to mind the teacher, how to mind your manners, all the basic kinds of things that you need to know how to do. How to walk, how to feed yourself with a spoon and a fork, all the basic things you need to know how to do when you're being raised at home. Economic and psychological support. So your family, economic support, they take care of you. They pay the bills. They're also the people who love you no matter what. Psychological support. Those are kind of easy. The fourth one may be kind of hard. Your family, that's who places you in the world. So whatever social class you're in, whatever neighborhood you got raised in, whatever we call it life chances, the deck of the hand you got dealt in life, that's because of your family. They did that to you. You had nothing to do with it. So you were born and you got taken home from the hospital, and there you are. And that's who you got stuck with. That's your family. And so whatever kind of, in America, that's the kind of school you get to go to. Our schools are locally funded. And so maybe you got to go to a great school with lots of resources, but maybe you got to go to a school that didn't have a lot of resources because of the neighborhood that you were raised in. Your family does that. Your family, the income that they had, the kinds of jobs that your parents had, the educational background that your parents had. That's what they pass on to you. And so that's one of the things that's one of the functions that family does. They provide the social status that you have. Boom. So those are the four functions of family. So you want to write that down and you want to define what those are and maybe write down some examples of that in your own life. How did your family sexually regulate your life? What were the rules in your family? Were there different rules for the boys in your family as opposed to the girls in your family? Was that different? Write some stuff down here when you're looking at this slide. I used the term there, life chances. Well, that's a German word invented by one of the other founders of sociology named Max Weber. The German word is Lebenschancen. And so this American sociologist, Karen Sternheimer, she says it's an opportunities that you got. They're shaped by your social class, by the status that your parents had. In America, we tend to think, because of just how Americans are, that we earn all of our chances in life, and it's all based on our efforts and how hard we work. And that's not always true. Our position in many ways is based on the kind of school we got to go to and the neighborhood we were raised in and what our family was able to pass on to us. The work ethic, the values, the resources that they had, and they could pass on to us. And we don't really think about that too much. We just take it for granted. And that's called life chances that we had. The kinds of options that we had, the choices in life that we had. And some of us had lots and lots of choices, and some of us didn't have as many choices in life. And that's because of our family. And that's because of their family. And that was because of their family. That's just how it works in life. Okay, let's look at some definitions here real quick. Definitions of family real quick. So right here, this is a real traditional, kind of an old-fashioned definition of family. I want you to pay attention to it. And there are definitions in the chapter, this first chapter in your textbook, of what a family is. So look at this. It's people, now look at this, who are, number one, related by what? Either blood, so that means you were born to that mother, so DNA, so this is my mom, this is my dad. So related by blood, or they were related by marriage, so there's a marriage certificate somewhere, legally they're connected, or by adoption, so there's another legal certificate somewhere. So look at this, blood, so there's a birth certificate. Marriage, there's a marriage certificate. Or adoption, so there's an adoption. So there's some kind of a legal connection that you have. People who are married live together. There's an address somewhere. They're an economic unit. So that means somebody's working and bringing home the bacon. Somebody's working. Somebody's spending the money. Somebody's going to the grocery store and buying groceries. So there's money coming in and money going out. Somebody's paying the electricity bill. So it's an economic unit going on. And the family, these are the people who bear and raise children. These are the people who have kids. Remember those functions of family? And they raise the kids. So they socialize children. They don't just have children at the hospital and then turn them loose, but they're responsible to raise the kids. Primary socialization is what we call this. They're responsible to teach the kids what they need to know. So this is a traditional definition of family. And all of society recognizes who are these kids' parents, who's responsible for these kids. Now, we've got some new definitions of family. You're going to see this in your textbook as well. So a new definition of family. So, and this is very common now. It's a relationship. Just a relationship. People live together with a commitment. These people who live together with a commitment, they could form an economic unit. So somebody's paying a bill, somebody's bringing in some money, somebody's got their name on a lease, somebody's paying for cable TV, somebody's paying for this. If there are any young, they're taking care of the young. They're in the family there. They're in that unit. They're living there. And they consider their identity to be significantly attached to that group. So it's not just a casual group, but this is an important part of my life here. Now, in my class, I would show people this slide, and I would ask students in my classroom, I would say to them, is it possible, looking at this definition, that you and your college roommates could could be called a family, and would you fit under this definition? And many of them say, well, yeah, this roommates in college could fit this definition. Some of them say no, but some of them say yes. So my point is that the definition of family with this new definition has gotten so broad that lots and lots and lots of living arrangements fall under this definition here. So think about that for just a minute. Think about some of the living arrangements that maybe you have right now, or maybe that your friends have right now, and this has gotten really broad, hasn't it? And so look at your textbook. Look at the definitions of family in your textbook as well, and see what fits under family. So let me show you this next slide here. What I think has happened is, and my concern is children. What's going on with children? What's happened is, and this is my theory. This is not in your textbook. What we used to have, look on the left. What we used to have is a social definition of family. That means that everybody in society recognizes, yeah, you're in that family because there's legal documents. You got a birth certificate. You got a marriage certificate. It's all at the courthouse down there. You're in an address. I know who lives at that address. You have a job and you're responsible to pay the bills here. Your name is on a lease. And the kids, when we go to school, the kids have to write in a document that says, here's my address and here's where my parents live. So it's a social definition of the family. We know who's responsible. And everybody in the neighborhood, everybody in the school district, everybody on your street knows who's responsible. It's a social definition. Now, what's emerged now, what we live with now, I'm calling a personal definition of family. And that means that I get to decide who my family is. And so this week, it's this boyfriend here that's my family now. Or next month, it's going to be Uncle Bob, who's not really my uncle, but he just hangs around the house a lot. And we consider him part of the family. And so it's cool and it's nice, and we just love that. And we love Uncle Bob. And he's here this year because he lost his job, and he lives with us now. And we just consider him part of the family, and it really works out great. And that's neat. And that's wonderful. The problem with that is, who's responsible for those children that get raised in that family? Who are we going to hold responsible? Who's the court going to hold responsible when the kid gets in trouble? So you're going to be taking criminal justice classes, and what you're going to have trouble with is when you have a kid in trouble at school, or a kid in trouble with the police, and the court's going to have to try to figure out, well, who's responsible for these kids? Is it going to be Uncle Bob? Well, he's not there anymore. Our mom, who's having to work 2 jobs because she's a single parent, and where's the father of these kids? We don't know, because we don't have a social definition anymore. We don't have any paperwork anymore. We don't have anybody who got married and who we filed a record anywhere, and so we can't hold anybody responsible, not because we want to blame somebody, but because we want to take care of those children. Because those children are children and they can't take care of themselves. We need to find responsible adults who we can hold responsible for the lives of children, who need to be raised and need to be taken care of. Does that make sense? And it's hard to do that when people are coming up with their own personal definitions of family that seem to work this week and seem to make them happy this year, but seem to leave the kids off on the side, and seem to leave kids off in the dust, and seem to leave kids, on their own. And kids are having to maybe raise themselves, and kids are kind of, left being raised by the state. And it's an awful situation for kids and juveniles and the criminal justice system and the juvenile court system. And it's awful because their families are falling apart and their dads are gone and they don't have dads. And so I want you to think about this slide. I want you to think about the difference between holding people responsible for their children, for the sake of their children, and having personal definitions because it makes me happy right now. But my kids suffer in the long run. So just think about the two, and just think about, maybe jot some notes down to yourself here and think about it for just a minute. Personal happiness. What's the cost of personal happiness in the lives of kids and children? Because if you're going to get involved in the criminal justice system, you're going to be dealing with the lives of children and the repercussions and the consequences of children later on when they become adults. Later on when they become young adults and 17-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds who are having a terrible time getting out of school and trying to make their lives work. And they didn't have any adults in their lives who made hard decisions and invested in their lives. That's the hard part of all this. So that's what I want you to kind of think about in this course. And when we try to think about definitions of family, why is family so important? It's for the sake of kids. Okay, so this last slide is just a kind of a summary. And all I want you to do is just look at that theory at the top, that hypothesis at the top. I just think families are essential. I just think we can't replace that. I don't think there's anything else to replace them with. Houston Independent School District right now is providing meals, all 3 meals a day for some of its students, because families can't do that. Families aren't feeding their own children. They just can't do that. And the school district can't teach kids who are hungry. And it discovered that it had hungry kids. And families weren't able. It discovered this. HISD discovered it had families who were sending hungry kids to school, and so it began to feed kids breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so I don't think a school district can become surrogate families, and even though it's having to do that. And so this course is going to help us think about what families are about and what families are supposed to do and how they work and how they don't work, and help you and help me think about, what am I supposed to be doing as a member of a family, and what can I do to help be a better member of an immediate and extended family. And then later on in my career, what can I do to help families work better? So that's what this first chapter is kind of about. This slideshow had a lot more information than is just in your chapter, so go back and look at your chapter. The object of the game here is to learn as much as you can about families, because it's going to help you tremendously in your larger career and help you personally as a person be a better member of a family and help your families that you're part of right now work better. And so you want to be somebody who's going to college and learning essential stuff so that you can be a better person and a more educated person. So that's what this is all about. Send an email if you have a question about anything every week of the course. No matter what, if you have questions about things, you should just always send emails and do as much as you can in the course. The course moves really fast. It goes in just 8 weeks, but send emails all the time, and let's get questions answered and get things, get problems solved as fast as we can. Don't wait. Anyway, I will talk to you again at the next slideshow.